Since I'm wearing it this time, that means you're wearing the one I make after I kick your maple leaf butt. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to a new monthly Mayhem. This time, Matt from Scale Builders Guild and myself are taking the Proline Short Course Fusion Kit and we're going to try and turn them into rock crawlers. Now, kind of a mix between a rock crawler and a rock racer, but we've set up a number of rules so that we can really try and make these things as similar as possible to an Axial Bomber. That is kind of our baseline. We've come up with a bunch of different measurements and statistics to try and match this vehicle as closely as we can to the Bomber. Now, of course, the Bomber is solid axle and this one's independent all the way around, but we're talking about things like ground clearance and turning radius and a bunch of things like that. We've come up with a huge list of things to kind of give us some points. And then there's going to be a showdown at the end, since Matt will be traveling here to California for the Proline by the Fire event. So we're going to be able to take the two trucks that we build and race them or rock crawl them or however you want to say it. We're going to go head to head. Being that Matt is going to travel here for an event, it gave us an awesome opportunity to do something that we could be a little bit more loose with, not having to have just a certain measurement like we had to do a top speed or a longest flight. It just gave us an opportunity to build something that is more in our wheelhouse and is going to be a lot of fun. Now, our goal for these rigs in the end is to make them look something like a 4400 class King of the Hammers type vehicle. So we're going to run a large tire. Both of us are going to be running the Proline Hyrax tires actually. And for this one, since this truck comes with a 17mm hex and it's got this large pillow block style steering knuckle, we're actually going to be running 2.230 wheels, since we want to try and keep the track width as close to a Bomber as possible. And to do that, we need to be able to have a large inner diameter to suck over top of that. I actually picked up some wheels from Mayhem that are the DE Racing wheels. These actually have a 17mm hex and they're that 2230 style. I took one of the 2.2 Hyraxes and stretched it over one of those wheels already actually, and it's not too bad. The inner bead does bulge out a decent amount, as you would expect with a 0.8 inch difference in inner diameter, but I think we'll be able to kind of overcome that. I don't plan, at this point at least, to cut the bead off and suck that in flat. We'll see if I end up having to do that based on some clearances and things like that that I've noticed. But at this point, at least, I'm going to try to avoid it. Now, right now I have those stock foams in here. I actually have some custom foams being made right now by Crawler Innovations to allow me to use a 2230 wheel like this with a proper amount of foam and good stability. I think it's going to help a lot with the performance that I'm going to shoot for overall. If you've never seen one of these Proline kits, it's actually very similar to their monster truck that they came out with last year as well. It's basically, they took an 8th scale drivetrain and kind of crammed it into something that is more along a 10th scale vehicle. So you've got a regular short course width, but you've got a really beefy drivetrain on the inside. Now, this does come as a kit and you have to assemble the whole thing. I spent the time prior to this video getting it ready. A friend of mine, Tony Mazza, came over and helped me with building some of the diffs and shocks and things like that, because he had some super heavyweight fluids that really helped. In the center diff, we went with basically a locking putty. So you really get it in there and just cram it in there and it basically locks up that center diff, but it's not 100% locked up. And then in the front and rear diffs, we went with 1 million weight fluid. Proline sent both Matt and I these vehicles, and when they did, they also sent us a number of little upgrades that they also make, such as these HD aluminum toe blocks, front and rear, uppers and lowers, as well as aluminum shock caps. And then in addition, they also sent us just some replacement parts in case we broke an arm or something like that. But I don't know that we'll need that. I'm not going to be driving these things at short course speeds, and these things look incredibly beefy. Now, as you can guess, this is meant to go fast, and while a little bit of speed is always what we're going to be after, especially since at Proline by the Fire we're going to set up a course that kind of mixes in technical rocky terrain as well as some open speed areas. We still want this thing to be able to have a decent amount of slow speed control, specifically because one of the measurements that we've put into this challenge is that we want to try and have it so it will do the slowest speed over a measured distance, 12 feet, and we want to try and make it just creep and crawl without stopping that entire time. That's like a little competition that you'll often see at full-size events where people try and show their lowest crawl ratio that they can do. They can put the car in the lowest gear they have and just let it creep from two distances, slowest car wins. So we're incorporating that challenge, and that will kind of play into how we finish setting up this vehicle. This thing is only geared at like 12 or 13 to 1 at its lowest with the smallest pinion you can fit in there. So that's a difficulty. There would be the option of actually taking out the center differential and then trying to come up with a way to mount a standard transmission, but that also brings in some other complexities, such as mounting drive shafts to dog bones and trying making up the right length. Not easy. We'll see how it goes in the end. Another difficult part about this is it's a monthly Mayhem, so we have a very set amount of time. Now, we did build in a little bit of buffer time between the last video and when Proline by the Fire is. So this one's still gonna be a month, give or take. But we have a lot of work to do in that time frame. And both of us are going to do some custom cage work to try and make these things look like those 4400 class vehicles. We're not just gonna slap a body on them. So some metal work, some fabrication, all of those things is what you're going to see in this series. Given that, there's probably not going to be a lot of running and testing that we're able to do during these times, just because we're going to be kind of hauling butt to try and get this vehicle looking like a 4400 class vehicle and trying to make it work to the specifications that we've put on ourselves. Now, there's not a ton of fully independent 4400 class cars. This year, one of my favorites was built by Trident Engineering and built for and with Jordan Pellegrino of Genrite. So that's kind of the style I'm going to go for. I'm probably not going to do a replica because replicas just take a ton of time, and that Trident Engineering car has a lot of rolled tubes and things like that, and I just don't think that there's any way that I'm going to be able to pull that off with a time crunch at the same time. So we're going to kind of use that as a vision or a style in our head, but more importantly, we're going to get it done. Now, an additional point that we put a little bit of emphasis on was scale looks, of course. We want these things to look appropriate and look scale and not just be, race cars. Both cars have to incorporate an interior and driver, so we decided to use Class 3 Sorca scale points as additional bonus points. Now, we don't have to meet Class 3 Sorca rules because this isn't gonna do that, but it will still allow us to add some of those other emphasis in areas to push us in that direction. I'm sure Matt's gonna need those points. This truck is built basically to the letter of the instructions. The only thing I think I switched around was I put the rear sway bar in the front and the rear. But really, I think that's about the only thing that I did. And in the end, I don't know that I'll even leave those sway bars on. They're just in there for now, just in case that it turned out that that's the way that I wanted to go. The only other differences are things like we installed the aluminum shock caps and those HD aluminum toe blocks. So I basically have the exact same base that Matt probably has if he followed the instructions as well. Now, with these Hyraxes mounted up on those DE wheels, there are a few things that I'm noticing right away that are of course going to make it even more difficult. This is a much taller tire than this vehicle is designed to run. So you take that and you combine it with the width, and it turns into clearance nightmares. Basically, the tire is going to start rubbing on the chassis. This chassis has got these nice big deflectors on the side to keep debris out of the chassis. Those are definitely what this tire is rubbing on. It'd be nice to just take those off, except the servo mount is also incorporated onto it on the passenger side. So if I remove those and start trimming the chassis, I'm going to have to come up with a way to mount and steer this thing. I'm sure I can figure that out, though. I'm not too worried about it. We're just going to have to get in, dive in, and start making those painful cuts. We did put a minimum weight of 9 pounds on this thing just to make sure that we didn't skimp on areas where, we would possibly do it just to make the performance that much better. I'll try and use this series to go a little bit more in depth on, the fabrication and tube work and, welding that I'm doing, but I'll also try and go through and show you the benders that I'm using. I'll be using both solid rod and tubing in multiple diameters from 1/8 inch to 3/16, from solid to tubing, as well as I'm sure some flat plate and thin gauge steel and aluminum. I'll probably try and spend more time on that in the vlog type settings than on the bench videos that we do every Wednesday. So again, bench videos every Wednesday, vlog updates every Friday throughout the monthly Mayhem series. What I'll try and do is give you guys a copy of the rules that Matt and I have come up with, and I'll put them in the description below towards the bottom. There's a big long list of them, and we've kind of hashed out back and forth through them. So I'll put those down at the bottom if you've got questions on exactly what we're trying to do. Hopefully this is along the lines of what you guys want to see out of a monthly Mayhem. It's definitely more in our wheelhouse, even though it's using a vehicle completely outside of what you would normally see us use. Kind of like the opposite of the Drag Bolt series, where we're using a vehicle you would think that we would normally use, but do something completely outside of what we would normally do. And that should be a recipe for fun, although I'm sure disaster is just around the corner. So drop any suggestions you guys have in the comments below. Always interesting to hear them on the monthly Mayhem series where things don't make any sense as they are. So drop them there. Appreciate you guys watching these. Make sure to hit the like button if you enjoy them. If you don't, there's a button for that too. Hit the subscribe button if you're not already. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you see them as soon as these videos pop up. Again, every Wednesday, every Friday, scale news on Tuesdays. Lots of videos coming out. But thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one.